Well, hello again. Now we're going to take a look at more detail as what came out of this study. And as I said again, I'm going to give you a website that you can go to and get the full report, final report, and look at things in detail if you're interested. The report is quite voluminous, but the thing to read is at least the executive summary. It's some 30 pages long. And some of the material you're going to see here in form of diagrams comes out of that part of the report. Well, when you start a technology assessment like this, which has to do with electrical energy generation, and as you know, energy consumption and income, personal disposable income and the like are related, that you need to have some driving force that's wanting to create the change. And electrical energy production is going to increase if gross domestic product increases. So one of the first things the group had to do is sit down and say, well, we got to project into the future. So we said, let's look up to, this was done in the 70s, okay? So let's go up to the year 2000, which of course is history now. But back then, we said, okay, we're going to assume that the gross domestic product increases at a certain percentage over that time frame. We could have said it was going to diminish, it was going to stay the same, whatever the case may be. But we used as the expertise of economists from various institutions to come up with a plausible, a reasonable estimate as to what the future may hold. You know, you can't predict what's going to happen tomorrow, so you have to realize this is kind of pie in the sky stuff, but still you had a plausible economic growth rate for the region. It has manufacturing's about 30% of the region's gross, part of that gross domestic product. Trade is about 16%, government 11%, finance about 12%, services and others about 10%. And all these use electrical energy, and so when you do your economic impact stuff relative to the impact assessment, you not only want to look at, oh yeah, well, so much electricity is going down the wires and it's being bought, but by whom and how does that affect their business? Because that's going to affect taxes, that's going to affect employment, that's going to affect a lot of things. And if the business increases and pollutants are emitted because it happens to be a manufacturing operation, or if it's agriculture, why then there's going to be aspects of that relative to infrastructure, finance again, and of course raw materials in and out of the region as well as waste. So what you do is, in this case where we're looking at a technology assessment of a electrical energy production which has across the board's impact on everything in the region, we came up with a gross domestic product and saw how that was distributed among the various economic sectors and how that would affect their growth and what that would mean relative to employment and so on and so forth, as well as, of course, just the environmental impacts. And we came up with 10 different scenarios that we looked at, you know, and I'm going to just mention 3 of them. One of them was kind of the base case. Well, we use coal and everything just like we, in the same ratios and all that we're using now, and that's the base case. Things just, keep growing the way they are. Nobody does anything different. Everything stays about the same. Then we looked at a case where there was high electrical energy growth. And then one where there was very little increase in electrical demand because it was lots of conservation. And just to give you some relative numbers, the installed electrical capacity for the base case would be 153,245 megawatts of electric generation, and compare that with the high electric use of 173,395 megawatts generated by the year 2000. Or in the conservation case, you'll see that the amount of installed capacity is considerably less. It's only 104,495 megawatts of electricity produced by the year 2000. So you see, electric demand is going to be distributed amongst these various economic sectors. Well, there's going to be some pollutants involved in all this. And the question was, well, how are they going to move in the region, because sulfur oxides, nitrous oxides, if they contribute to acid rain, and they do because nitric acid is formed from the nitrates and sulfuric acid from the sulfates. And when it rains, they get in there, and the sunshine affects the chemical reaction in the raindrops. And so you get acid rain. I mean, you actually look at the pH, it's different. And we know it is because lakes and rivers get affected by this. Furthermore, by use of coal and coal mining, we know that streams, you get acid affects the streams because the bacteria that's living in the coals eating the sulfur, and out come sulfates, which make sulfuric acid, and of course the streams acidify. Well, anyway, what kind of data did we get, for example, when we went to this company in California to get meteorological data, which then we could use in our pollutant transport models? And if you look at these figures that I have here, you'll see how things change over a period of years in different. Here's the average annual sulfite concentration in the electric utility district contribution to that under two cases. So this kind of data became evident. So people in farming, people who were breathing air, or whatever the case may be, policymakers could look at this and they say, gee whiz, we probably ought to do something about this with some laws and regulations, or whatever the case may be. So these are the kinds of data that were acquired and made available to everybody so they can make some decisions. What's another type of data that was formed? Well, here's a case in this next diagram which looks at construction workers. And you'll see that we have the base case, that's the BC, and the high electrical energy growth. So you can see over a period of time, the workforce is needed. Well, this is of interest to people too. So these kind of data, and this is only two of the many, many kinds of information that were developed, makes it possible for people to make a somewhat intelligent decision about what they would like their future to be. You see, that's really at the base of all this, isn't it? We as individuals want to chart our own course in life. And we realize, of course, that we just all can't go however willy-nilly because there'll be too much conflict. So that's why we have ethics for our culture. So what's virtuous behavior? Some people will follow that, others will ignore it and do their own thing anyway. And, of course, we have laws to control that. People need to have a voice to say about how their life is going to be affected. And if they don't, they're unhappy. These impact assessments, where you begin looking at how the technology coming in, whether it's designer babies or whatever, is going to affect you, you want to have something to say about that. Well, I'm going to leave you with references to two other reports besides the Ohio River Basin Energy Study. One of them is very good. It's the ethical implications of global climate change by COMES. It's a UN, United Nations organization, part of UNESCO. And I really recommend that you take a look and read this because they really address the issue of what are the ethics that we must consider when it relates to climate change. And the thing that made me very happy when I read it was the fact they said, we have to consider the impact that what we do has on our neighbor, on our other friends in this world we live in, the other people that live in this world with us. And you'll see that. And then, of course, there's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and I've left you a reference for that because that, too, will show you what's going on. Well, why would you be interested in this? Well, you should be interested in it because this is like you were somebody sitting in the ORBS project, the Ohio River Basin Energy Study, getting data from our core team. But what you're doing now is you're getting data from the United Nations and other international groups that says, hey, looky, this is what we're measuring. This is what we think is going to happen to you in your life, in your region, and you should, as a person, begin doing something about it, because that's the action side that we're going to be talking about in the next 2 weeks. So please, read these documents. And the only reason I picked electrical energy versus cell phones or some biological thing that's going on where, for example, they can take adult stem cells now on some animals and turn them into embryonic stem cells, which is a really phenomenal event, really. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on, but I just picked electrical energy because it's a technology which affects all of us and, of course, relates to the pollution issue and climate change. Okay, well, that's all we're going to say about this. I'm going to give you another example on a solar-powered satellite, which we will talk about next. And so, see you later.